Hey there, I am your host, Ellie, and I want to welcome you to the Storytime with Ellie podcast. Today's guest, we have David. He is the founder and CEO of Darren Deeply Life Coaching. Alongside with his wife, Paige, he assist, they assist men and women and couples in achieving their profound freedom, healing, and transformation from past emotional pain and trauma. With over 30 years, David has experience in relationships, wellness, and communication. Together, they empower clients to cultivate awareness and emotional healing. Their approach helps individuals break negative patterns and embark on a life-changing, extraordinary journey. Let's welcome David and Paige Lea. Welcome.
Hello, Ellie.
Hi, Ellie.
Thanks for having us.
Oh, gosh, thank you for being on here. We got a lot of good stuff today we're going to be talking about. And I think what we're going to be discussing is going to touch a lot of people because I think we all have that. I don't want to say emotional baggage, but I think we do. We can shake
That
our
would be
heads.
correct.
We can shake our
That
heads on that one.
that
Yeah,
would be correct.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah.
it doesn't have to
Okay.
be a bad word. Emotional baggage
No.
doesn't have to be
No,
a bad
no,
word.
but a lot of people, that's like, "Okay, what kind of emotional baggage are they carrying?"
Mm,
It's either, check under the plane or over the top.
or
Anyway,
both.
check it. Yeah, we know.
Mhm. Yeah.
Okay, so can you just share your journey with us? What inspired you both to get into this and focus on emotional healing and transformation, and together actually as a couple too? So that's kind of a loaded question. Give you something to
Yeah.
talk about.
Yeah. I was working with a client earlier today, Ellie, and I asked him a pop quiz question.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, do you have any idea who Daring Deeply, which is the name of our coaching practice, do you have any idea who Daring Deeply's first client was? And he looked at me back through the screen through our coaching session with a wrinkled eyebrow, and then I just simply pointed to myself. I said, I
Mm,
was the very first client of Daring Deeply relationship coaching because I needed what we now help men, women, and couples all over the planet begin to identify, begin to validate their emotional trauma through a masculine and feminine energetic lens. I needed this. So,
mm,
how did I get to this space? My own pain, my own unprocessed childhood trauma that I didn't know was there. I didn't know existed for decades and decades until I was introduced to trauma healing and realizing that trauma is simply identified as the nervous system being overwhelmed. That's
mm.
it. So, for example, when I fell off my bike, I was 5 years old, skinned my knee, and my caregiver simply said these words: get over it, rub some dirt in it, you'll be okay, boys don't cry. That, Ellie, then entered into my nervous system right there on the spot
Mm.
as unprocessed trauma and
Gotcha.
forever resided inside of my nervous system for decades until I began to process it, to identify it, to realize that that original incident when I was 5 years old was still affecting my adult life. And
Interesting.
so, how did I get into this relationship space where we help men and women and couples begin to identify their original trauma wounding to help them thrive into their adult relationships? That's where I came from. And I'm certain that Paige has a very similar story.
Yeah, love it. Yeah, let's hear you, Paige.
hmm Yeah, I think I had this preconceived understanding of, misunderstanding, I should say, of what I thought trauma was. I thought trauma was big and bad and these really
Mm,
horrific events. But then I began to learn a whole new world of trauma and began to understand that trauma can be big or little. It could be micro moments where all of a sudden your emotions aren't necessarily allowed to be expressed or heard or received, or they can be pain or feelings of betrayal that you experienced in relationships with anyone,
mm,
and most especially yourself. And so when I began to broaden my scope and depth of understanding of what trauma is, that's when I began to see myself different. And that's when my self identity began to change. I feel like my confidence began to change. I understand more about who I am as a woman, what I need, and then how I can begin to communicate that outwardly to others, most especially David, my husband,
right.
which has
Mhm.
truly strengthened our marriage
Nice.
in just me knowing myself, him knowing himself, and the way we choose to come together and co-create is much deeper and more genuine now.
Great. That's fantastic. So from what I'm hearing, it's, as you said, the trauma that we went through, most like one of you said, one said it's, you think it's a big thing, but it's really not, is what you're saying. It could be, we probably don't even remember what it was really that triggered us to who we are as adults, right? When we're doing all these crazy
Mhm.
things, we probably don't remember what that trauma was. Do you help your clients identify that at
Hmm.
all?
Yeah,
Okay, cool.
that is essentially what we help our clients
Mm,
begin to process
mm,
is, and how we do that is identifying the behavioral symptoms of their life today in adulthood. And we identify that further, we drill down even further and help them identify it as either a masculine or a feminine energetic wound. So,
mm.
for example, an over controlling, overbearing symptom that comes forth in so many of us is actually attached and under the flag. You just raised your eyebrows. I saw you,
Well,
Ellie. You're
I
like,
think I'm going
nah.
to relate to this. I'm going to really relate to this.
Right, exactly. Exactly. So many people are raising their hand right now.
I know.
So if you tend to have an over controlling, overbearing personality, that is a behavioral symptom that's tied to an unprocessed childhood wound that
Mm,
says once upon a time as a little girl, you didn't have control, that you weren't allowed to speak, that you were dismissed, ignored, bypassed potentially. And so now you have placed a wall as we speak, and that is a masculine energetic wound. And it's associated directly with that unprocessed trauma wound from your childhood when you were a little girl once upon a time and someone told you to be quiet or to shut down your emotions, or
mm,
that what you felt wasn't real, that you cannot make decisions out of emotions, et cetera, et cetera. Well, that again encased itself inside of your nervous system and simply began to recycle for decades until you begin to address it and begin to understand, wow, this has a root cause that is decades old. It has
mm.
nothing to do with your spouse. It has nothing to do
Oh,
with
right.
your
Yeah.
former spouse.
Yeah. I
Right?
think
It
we're all
has everything
realizing
to
that.
do with,
Mm,
yeah, exactly.
I think
Is
we're
that
all,
we may feel frustrated, we may be in conflict in the
mhm,
moment with our
mhm,
spouse, but ultimately we're wrestling with an unprocessed wound from decades prior.
mm. Okay. So you mentioned the femininity and the masculinity. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
so in other words, like I have more masculinity than I have femininity. So that would probably was my problem. I was told to shut up. I don't mean to make
Mm,
it, I,
mm-hmm.
yeah, it's
Mm-hmm.
probably,
Yeah.
because I come from a family of six siblings. So yeah, we
Mm-hmm.
probably did have that because
Exactly. You needed to figure out some way to have a voice in a
yeah,
family of
it's
six
interesting.
kids. Yeah, absolutely. So how we've identified, for example, if you came to us, Ellie, and you said, listen, I think I have more controlling, more demanding, more projective, more defensive energy, and I have more masculine energy, we would identify that as wounded masculine energetic narratives. And the reason how you got there was to compensate, was you
Mm,
needed to place up that wall, you needed to place up that bravado in order for you to feel safe. And so
interesting. Yeah.
often what happens is men and women will come to us where the men are far more in their wounded feminine energy, more of their passive, reluctant, what's another word? Passive, reluctant, nice guy
Indecisive.
energy.
Mm.
Yeah, indecisive energy. And the women will come to us in more of that overbearing, over controlling,
I'm really not
wounded
overbearing. I want to
masculine
clear that
energy.
up. I'm really not.
So,
I do have a flexibility there,
yeah. So what
but
happens
I
is
get the
what
point.
we identify that as is an inverted marriage dynamic.
Hmm.
Is when the men are more in their wounded feminine energy and the men and the women are more in their wounded masculine energy. They're inverted. In fact, how do we know this so well? This is how we were, Paige and David.
Hmm.
When we met, I was more in my wounded feminine. She was more in her wounded masculine. Now we attracted one another because opposites attract. And it felt
Mm,
incredibly familiar for me to attract a woman more in her masculine. What I
mm,
didn't realize until years later when I began my individual work was that that was completely out of my energetic alignment, that I
mm.
wanted and desired and craved to be more in my masculine. And Paige's side of the story, she can tell in just a moment, is that she realized, wow, I am more in my masculine. I want to begin to surrender. I want to begin to soften
Yeah.
more
Hmm.
into my feminine energy.
Wow.
Mhm.
Let's hear yours. Let's hear you, Paige.
Yeah. Wow. This journey has truly been transformative and super eye-opening and challenging in every way and super enriching too. I feel like I spent decades of my life just controlling everything. I feel like I was in control. I was the leader. I was the decision maker. I was the one who
Hmm.
planned everything, organized everything, kept everything in line, myself and everyone around me, did all the reach outs and the leading and communicating, etc. And I didn't realize and how exhausted all of that was making me. I was so tired. I was just
Mm,
constantly overextending and really putting others before me and
mm,
living my life in a way that was accommodating everyone else around me but myself, most
mm,
especially my partner. And so that's when I had to zoom out a little bit and really get honest with myself. We were gaining some understanding of trauma healing, masculine, feminine energy, understanding those different dynamics, and then understanding that behind every decision and choice and thought that we have, there is a reason. And so
mhm,
we began to trace back those reasons throughout my life as to why am I overextending? Why am I taking the lead? Why am I choosing to make all of the decisions and be the leader in these relationships? And it really all stems back from the unprocessed experiences from my childhood that led me to believe that that was the safest way to exist.
mm,
And so there's a lot of peeling back in this process and discovery to really understand where you came from, thoughts, feelings, emotions, decisions, choices, etc. And then once you begin to explore yourself in those ways, wow, do decisions and values change? They begin to shift a little bit because now you're orienting your life around you for perhaps the very first time. And what feels true for me is to be more in a flexible, fluid, creative, intuitive, feminine way of being. That is an energy that brings me life. The
mm,
masculine energy depletes me. Yes, I
mhm,
can do it. And I've done it really well for a long time, but it doesn't bring me life. It takes a lot of energy, a lot of expense there. And masculine energy is important for women. This is
yes.
where we have free will and choice. This is where we make decisions. This is action. This is how we keep moving forward. But when we have too much masculine energy and too little feminine energy, that's where we end up with these women that are burnt out.
Mhm,
They're exhausted, they are tired, they are overwhelmed, and they just want help. They want support. They want someone to co-lead or take the lead
mhm,
so that she can rest and relax. And so
makes
that's
sense. Mhm,
once we began to understand the nuances of the healing journey in those ways, that's when some big shifts began to happen in our marriage, my relationship with David. And he was stepping more into his masculine energy. I was able to step back into my feminine energy, where both of us felt more at home in the body that we currently in. So wholeness.
beautiful. Mhm.
Yeah,
E-
it's a beautiful gift.
Excellent. Yeah, totally. That you've both found this and reached it, and that you're here now trying to, well, you are. You're teaching, coaching other people how to discover their own masculine and feminine energies.
Mm,
Now, makes a lot of sense what you're saying. I can totally relate to this. Now, when someone comes in, how do you start with that? How do you
hmm
peel back the layers, so to speak,
hmm
when they
Yeah.
come in?
Yeah, that's it's really begins with tell me about what's going on now. In fact, that's the
Mm,
first question
okay.
when I get on a discovery call with someone and they're interested in working with us and seeing if it's a good fit, is I will say, tell me why we're here. What is confusing? What is frustrating? What is bringing you deep recesses of anger within your life right now? What seems to continue to come forward? What are the patterns that you see in your relationships that are frustrating? What are the conflicts that never seem to be resolved? Tell me about what's going on. And 100% of the time, Ellie, what they will speak to is, this is what I feel. I am so enraged. Well, that's all connected to an unprocessed wound from childhood. Now, it may
Mm,
feel like to them, like it's
it's
their
today.
spouse. It's
Mm,
today. It may feel like that their spouse continues to do this and do that, and that's why they are struggling. What's important for them to realize is that this is an individual journey and has nothing to do with your spouse. So we promote one of the pillars of our coaching practice. What makes us incredibly unique is we focus on extreme ownership, radical personal responsibility. It is our responsibility, my responsibility to heal. And my healing journey has nothing to do with my wife's. Now, ultimately, how we want to move our clients forward and how we move forward in our marriage dynamic is we want them to realize that a relationship is simply defined as this. That's me speaking, I am committed to my own consistent daily healing, growth, and transformation so that then I can support my wife who is committed to do the same.
Mm.
That's all a relationship is. It's not building a 401k. It's not having children. It's not having dogs. It's not having massive bank accounts and luxurious vacations. Those could certainly be an outpouring of a healthy dynamic, but it
Mhm.
all begins with radical personal responsibility on one's wounds, that we begin to identify what those wounds are and help them process their wounds. And it is an incredibly pervasive narrative that says, well, what about my spouse? How are they going
Mm.
to heal? They need to do this too. We need to do this together. And that's unequivocally incorrect. You do not heal, fix, or mend a relationship. It's impossible.
Right.
You can only focus on your own healing, growth, and transformation.
Right. And then once they are healed, hopefully, and they will, how do they get their spouse? Because like I say, we all have this. We all have this baggage. And because otherwise now it's one-sided. If we have
Mm-hmm.
one person that's healed, how do you coax them in to bring in the spouse? I hate
Yeah.
the word use coax, but how do you get them to do that?
Hey, that it's the word you used, Ellie,
Yeah.
so I will honor it. Yeah, that
Yeah.
is
I
that is
it's
that is completely what so many
authentic.
folks believe. Yes, exactly. Coax, let's call it what it is.
Yeah.
Coerce, manipulate,
Yeah.
tell, suggest.
Yeah.
The truth and the answer to that question is you cannot ever.
Mm.
You cannot coerce, manipulate, change, fix, mend anyone, only but you. And yes, this, in fact, I was on a discovery call earlier today, and this particular individual looked back at the camera with me as he's trying to decide if he wants to move forward and he heals in his healing journey.
Hmm.
And he said, so it makes sense to me as you're explaining this, as he's telling me, that I could do this work, but my spouse may not.
Hmm.
Or they may do their healing, I may do my healing, and we may come together, look at one another and say, I don't think I want to be in this
Right.
relationship anymore.
Move on. Hmm.
Uh-huh.
But at
And I
least you're
think what he
fixed.
was asking, I think what he
Mm.
was really asking was, uh-oh, what if that happens? And I said, I completely understand. I get it. But I promise you, when you're more in that healing state, and then you would both come together and look at one another, it's going to feel like a decision at peace. It won't feel like a loss. It will feel like a necessary completion in order to release both of you into a future that honors you both.
Right. And you need that. You need that. If you're healthy, right, we're the healthy individual, they coach, they know what they're going, they know it makes the rest so easy to fall into that you can just, if it's not going to work, you're already prepared for that. Like, okay, well, I know who I am. You'll have to
Precisely.
figure out who you are, but no sense in sitting and suffering anymore. But yeah, very cool. Makes
Yeah.
sense.
Yeah.
Cool. Yeah.
There's no such thing as a loss. There are only lessons to
Hmm.
glean and to learn from as you continue to journey forward. So even though it might feel like a loss of a relationship, really it's been a beautiful opportunity to learn and grow and elevate you up to this point,
Hmm.
this state of awareness, consciousness, and then for you to continue journeying forward based upon these more refined understandings and needs that you have of yourself at that point.
Oh, excellent. Excellent. Um, so let's, get that out of there. Edit. No. Edit that. Would you be able to share a story or two of some of the clients that you did help,
Hmm.
Absolutely.
whether they be individuals or couples or both?
Yeah. I will read you something,
Mm.
and right here, that I received just yesterday from one of our clients. And this is what she says. Our work, meaning our work and my
Hmm.
work with her, our work has revealed to me that it was the little girl that wanted to be seen and heard and loved, no matter what it cost her, because I felt alone and unloved most of my life. I am feeling and grieving. I can't change my past choices, but I am feeling less trapped about my future.
Oh, wow. Beautiful.
Yeah, that is
Makes me want to cry.
one.
Yeah.
Yeah,
That's got to
it
make you
is.
feel good. And it almost makes you want to
Absolutely.
cry.
Yes.
I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. It's
Yes.
emotional. Very,
Yeah.
wow.
It is a journey. And as
Mm.
you heard those words, what was so
Hmm.
empowering for me and encouraging for her is that she realizes she's not arrived. And in fact, no one is healed. We are on the process of healing for the
Mm-hmm.
rest of our days.
Mm,
So what she realizes is I have come so far and I have so far to go, and I'm okay with that. And far too often, folks will come to us and they will come from a level of microwavable transformation. They will come from where they want to heal as quick as they can because they're in pain, they're in discomfort.
mm-hmm.
And let's be honest, most of life around us is about efficiency and how fast can we get this done. The reality is, healing our emotional wounds from childhood is a lifelong process, and that's okay. We're all on the journey. I'm on the journey. Paige is on the journey. You're on the journey,
Yeah,
Ellie.
everyone's on a,
And it's super important to understand we take it one step at a time. That's why this isn't a rigid process in which we take our clients through.
mm-hmm.
Everyone is completely unique. And so, in fact, healing is a feminine energy. It's fluid, sometimes chaotic,
Mm-hmm.
moves back and forth. But my job as I coach these individuals one-on-one is to provide a masculine framework
Mm-hmm.
for them to move through at their pace.
Very good. Very nice.
Yeah.
Well,
Babe, did you
and
have a story you wanted to share?
yeah, let's
Anything
hear
that
another
came forward?
story. Yeah, if not, no worries,
Yeah.
because, and again, I always tell people don't use names, don't use, it's like, keep it on the,
I
but,
mean, there's so many stories. One that comes to mind in general, I would say, is when women come in to begin their work with us, many of them will say, I just don't know how to love myself. I've been trying to convince myself for years and years and years to love myself and doing self-care practices and self-love strategies. And I feel like I'm doing it all, but why don't I love myself?
that's a big one.
That's a huge one.
Mm-hmm.
Not only
Yeah.
just women, but men feel that way too.
Oh, yeah.
And so it's amazing for me to be witness to the tiny little steps that they show up and take every single day, consistently asking questions, setting boundaries, holding space for their emotions, choosing to complete relationships that aren't maybe necessarily aligned anymore. They're standing up for themselves. They're leaning into things that bring them joy and bring them life. And then they'll stand in front of the mirror and they'll have a moment to say, wow, I am beginning to love myself. This is what this feels like.
You'd
This
probably
is what
recommend that,
I'm missing.
and you probably do recommend that a lot for self-worth, for people to look at themselves and say and repeat
Absolutely.
and in a mindset that they're worth it, and they're, because I do some coaching as well, and that's one thing I always have to tell, you got to look at yourself like that you're special, that you're smart, and you are, but they
Mhm.
have a hard time identifying that. Can you share with us maybe a little something to help people identify that, or is it just speak in, or do
Yeah.
you have any kind of lessons that you give them to say, to help them practice their self-worth?
Yeah, absolutely. There's so much that we offer. And as David mentioned, the journey is so fluid
Mm-hmm.
and not cookie cutter by any stretch. But in order to love yourself, it's really important to give voice to the parts of you that don't love yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Like you really have to be honest with yourself and let that part of you speak because that is part of the unprocessed trauma that's still waiting to be heard, still waiting to be revealed and just simply validated. Like, yep, I can understand that that part of me really doesn't like the way I look or this looks or the way I show up here or the way I act here. So, in order to embrace more of an authentic, genuine love for yourself, you first need to meet yourself where you currently are in the
Okay.
places that don't necessarily love yourself.
Interesting.
And that can feel really hard and uncomfortable to
Mm-hmm.
allow yourself to go to that place. But that's the key. That's the trick. There's no way around this. You have to go through it and you have to let yourself speak those things that feel uncomfortable.
Well said. This question is for both of you, and naturally I'm going to circle around to the relationship or how we pick.
Hmm.
Look at you both shaking your head. How we our choices, and how many times have we said, "What is wrong with me? Why do I keep picking the wrong people?" And this is something
Hmm.
that I think people say at least once a day.
It's
Could you
yeah,
shed some light on that?
yeah, yeah. Very
I mean,
true.
why, right? Why do
Yeah,
we
yeah.
pick? And I
Why?
see it
Well,
too,
that's
right? You have friends.
yeah.
We have friends too. Like, why should keep going? Or why does he keep going out with that same type? So how
Yeah.
would you,
Mhm.
do you ask them about that when they come in? Like if they come in, like, help me out. Why am I going out with that same type of person? And
Mhm.
all right,
It's
let's
very,
hear that.
yeah, it's very,
Let's hear
it's
that.
very, it's actually very simple. Not easy, but
Mm,
it's actually very simple. So when we make a choice in a partner, Ellie,
hmm
we are actually choosing what feels familiar.
hmm
Now, those familiarities are most often tied to the inner wounds left unprocessed from our childhood. So we will choose actually the wounds of our partner to connect to the wounds of ourselves. So this is what we flag as the law of polarity, the law of attraction. We will attract what feels familiar. So if we had an overbearing, over-controlling father entity in childhood, we will more than likely choose that again because it feels familiar. And those
mm,
parts of us will come forward and say, this is true. This is good for you because it feels familiar. Now, what's really interesting and important to note is that our nervous system is incredibly powerful and it's myopic. It's singularly focused to keep you alive. So it believes that if you choose someone who may be nicer and not over controlling and overbearing, you literally could lose your life if you
mm.
choose someone who that is out of familiarity from what your nervous system has communicated to you to believe that's what keeps you safe. It's
So it's a fear factor.
absolutely it's absolutely fascinating. Well,
Yeah.
the fear
hmm
often is I don't know how I live in a relationship with someone who's not over controlling, who's not overbearing. I don't know how to operate in that space. And as we know, the devil we know sometimes is much safer than the angel we don't. And so
Yeah.
our nervous
It's easier
system
to
keeps
stay
us
than
safe.
leave. Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely it is.
Wow.
Because of our attachment to the fear of being alone, for example. We would rather be in a connective relationship that feels familiar rather than something that feels out of bounds.
Interesting. So if somebody is in a relationship and as we it could be friends, it could be whatever, and you see this relationship that is so toxic and this person getting walked on day in and day out, and they don't want to listen to you because you can't say too much. What are they doing? What are they thinking when they're in this relationship with somebody? And when I say they get walked on, I mean they're, in every which way disrespected, including, infidelity and everything else, and they stay there.
Mm-hmm.
What
Yeah.
is that person thinking?
Well, they're not. They're feeling. They're not thinking, they're
Mm,
feeling. They're
okay.
feeling, and all they see, again, the nervous system is myopic. It's incredibly singularly
hmm
focused
They
to
just
keep you safe, to keep you alive. And what they feel is familiarity. So that over controlling, overbearing behavior from a partner
hmm
feels safe to them.
mm.
Anything outside of, I see your eyes raising too. Me
Yeah,
too.
no, it's
Yeah, it's
crazy. I
seemingly
know. Yeah, yeah.
crazy. However, it's not crazy. It's normal to what their nervous system has experienced. It feels absolutely true to them. So we help them not navigate and try to fix their spouse or try to figure out why they
Totally.
are quote narcissistic. We
hmm
what we do is we help them identify the wounds that are keeping them in a space that feels safe but ultimately is very unsafe for them. But
Okay.
they have to identify where those wounds come from, and we help them get to that place to
Right.
understand truly there is an original, as we say, and using Richard Schwartz's work and Parts' work in general, we help them identify an original incident, an OI, from their childhood when they first felt overly controlled. And we help them
Mhm.
build a new relationship with that child who was 3 or 5 or 7 or 12 begin to real because that 12-year-old really believes that the adult is still 12 years old and still stuck in that moment.
Mm.
That's why that emotional response continues to recycle and come forward because
Okay.
that part of them still feels 12 years old.
Wow.
Go ahead, babe.
It also could be the exact opposite.
Mm-hmm.
So, if you grew up in a home or a family dynamic where your caregivers or parents were never around, you felt abandoned, you felt alone, you didn't feel worthy of love or attention. And then now you're in this relationship cycle where it's super unhealthy, but they're giving you attention. They're
Mm.
there. They're showing up. Even though it's unhealthy, negative
Yeah.
attention, you're still receiving attention,
Gotcha.
which could feed and satisfy much of those cravings just simply to belong and be seen. And so that alone can keep individuals in relationships just simply because they feel like they're getting something.
Gotcha. Yeah, even though it's negative, it's
Hmm.
that comfort that they have. Wow.
Yeah. Like someone is better than no one type of thing.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. That's what I say to them.
Something is better
It's
than
like,
nothing.
why
Yeah.
would you stay there? A lot of, I mean, it is financial. I'm not going to get into that, but a lot of times it is financial. But then again, I look at it like there is no money worth that because you can't put a price on your dignity, your thought, what you feel, because it's only going to make it worse. It's going to dig in.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Hmm.
Uh,
Thanks
what
for
else?
asking that question.
Yeah,
It's a
it's kind of
fantastic
great.
I love
question.
that.
One we get every day.
Hmm.
Yeah. Well,
Very
that's what,
common.
yeah, because I see it, right? We see it. And you have to scratch your head like, wow, what were they thinking? You know?
Mhm. Yeah.
Um, what other questions can we just throw out there? What are the like we'd like to if you want to touch more on what other topics of what you discuss or
Yeah,
feel free.
I think the most challenging, and I alluded to this earlier, Ellie, is the most challenging aspect to all of this is taking complete ownership over one's own personal
Hmm.
journey. It's so hard because we've been inundated with this collective codependency that says we do everything together. I'm in a couple now, two shall become one. And the reality is that is one, a misinterpretation of an ancient scripture for one,
Mm.
but it is about how am I going to make the decisions for me to move forward. So ultimately, do I work with married couples where I work with the husband and the spouse? I do.
Hmm. Hmm.
Absolutely. That is ideal from our perspective. But
Right.
we do have where I work with the husband or I work with the spouse, the wife, and I don't work with the other
All
spouse
right. So who
necessarily.
wants to be helped or who wants to
Yeah,
be?
yeah. It's who is taking the mantle,
Hmm.
as scary as it can be, because it can be. When you venture out alone and really begin to understand this
Hmm.
extreme ownership, it can feel lonely. In fact, I often say we bring aliens into our coaching practice. We're aliens too, meaning that we're unusual, we're weird. Oftentimes, we're the generational breakers within our family dynamic,
Hmm.
within the legacy of the trauma within our family lifeline. And that can be an incredibly lonely place, especially if our family of origin may be resistant to the fact that there may be unprocessed trauma permeating throughout the family line. And so I
Hmm.
know that's the case in my situation, it's the case in Paige's situation. And so here we have David and Paige who are married and now helping fellow aliens really begin to
Yeah. It's
understand
like get on the
that
ship. No.
yeah, it's an incredibly can be an incredibly lonely place, and that's why we want to build this community. We want to build this coaching community where people can feel safe and secure and prioritized and taken care of in the sense of you're not alone. What you want to do when you step forward to heal your unprocessed trauma wounding, it's not unusual, and it can feel that way.
And this is the outcome as an adult, right?
Yeah.
We're adults and now we're dealing with this. It's
Hmm.
almost like maybe they should take some of the classes out of the school and incorporate
Bingo.
Bingo. We say this often, Ellie. We
yeah,
say
some
this
of
often.
this
Yep.
into the schools to
Yeah.
help heal before they get out in the mainstream and screw everybody up.
You're precisely
Because
correct. Yeah.
then you got a bunch of
Yeah.
people that are in their 40s and however or whatever age and
Hmm.
where everyone's divorced. You're like,
Yeah.
I shouldn't
Yeah.
be laughing about it, but
Yeah.
you know what
We
I'm
we
saying.
often say that. We
We got a
we
bunch
often
of broken
say that.
people, and now we're all here, and this is what you got. You got a ship full
Yeah.
of broken people, and everyone's just
Yeah.
trying to figure it out. And they're all running around like a bunch of, loony
Yeah.
bins.
Yeah. It's
I
it's
can say it
difficult.
because, yeah, because we're out, but
Hmm.
and it's all this, it's all the same thing. And you do recognize it when you start talking to people and you're like, okay, we all have something, but it's like, wow, they really should got that fixed a long time ago. And too bad
Hmm.
they couldn't do something like this into schools or into something, or even, maybe not into the school, but to educate, to know that this is
Hmm.
something, this program, what you do together is
Yeah.
something that it would probably be smart to get people in that even at a younger age.
Hmm. Oh yeah.
You
We
know?
we absolutely promote that idea because
Yeah,
in
I
essence,
think
what
it's a
we're doing
great
now is
idea.
adult education.
Hmm.
But boy, wouldn't it have been great if I could
Yeah,
have taken Relationship 101, Polarity 102 as a
yeah,
freshman in high school rather
right,
rather
right.
than some of the other classes. And with all due respect to trigonometrists throughout
Yeah,
the world, I
yeah,
probably could have dealt
yeah,
been just
totally.
fine without trigonometry and been thinking
L-
about, oh, how do I
Life.
manage
Yeah.
my masculinity? How do I navigate a relationship with a woman? What is a
Hmm.
woman? What, you know, all
Yeah.
these really complex but incredibly important ideas that are
Oh, yeah.
lost, that certainly aren't taught. But we're doing our share.
You're
That's what
doing your
gets me up
diligence there. You are, both
out
of
of
you.
bed every morning, Ellie. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Yeah.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Very
Hmm.
nice. Anything that you'd like to share with us before we part ways? Any more? You had great advice. Love it. Your program, if
Hmm.
well, real quick, um, to find you, well, we will put that on the podcast stuff, but
Hmm.
uh,
Yeah.
they schedule appointments with you. You do virtual, obviously, or do
Yep.
you also have
Yeah.
an in where they can come into an office, or it's just all
Yeah.
virtual?
Yeah, so you can find us at daring-deeply.com.
Hmm.
Make sure you have the dash in there. So it's daring-deeply.com. Daring Deeply
Hmm.
is the title of our coaching practice. You can find us on the web, and we're all over. We have a robust appearance here on social media, TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, Instagram.
Right.
You can find us there. And so watch us, creep us, stalk us, folks. learn learn what we bring to the world. And if it feels like it is a next step for you, you can jump on a discovery call with me and we can talk about what my
Right.
one-on-one coaching program looks like and see if it's a good fit, see if you qualify for that. And that's how we move forward.
Yeah,
So we
love it.
look forward to having those conversations.
Love it. How about you, Paige? Anything you want to say goodbye? Pardon?
I want to thank you, really. I want to
Oh,
just send
thank you
some
guys.
appreciation to you for hosting this conversation and asking fantastic questions and just
Oh,
holding
thank you.
space and listening and learning. I so appreciate your presence.
I love what you're doing. I believe in it because I'm out there. I'm in
Mm.
groups,
Yeah.
tons of them. And like I
Yeah.
said, I mean, probably should give me your cards.
Please come and find us.
Yeah,
Please come and find us.
we're
Yeah.
gonna pass them
That's
cards
right.
out.
That's right. That's right.
Love it.
Yeah.
All right.
Thank you,
Thanks,
Ellie.
David. Thanks, Paige, for being on the Storytime with Ellie podcast, where everybody has a story and what is yours. Thanks again, guys.